Okay, real life traders, welcome. Friday, December 1st. Wow, this year is flying by. One more month in the year. Christmas and Hanukkah right around the corner. New Year's, exciting stuff happening this month. 3 o'clock, December 1st. We are taking a look at Delta right now. Johnny was setting it up. It's again one of those Fridays where I could see it going either way right now. It's Delta has made a really nice move today here. If we look at it, let me pull this back a little bit here and get a look at it on the 15-minute chart. Right. So if we just look at it on the 15-minute chart at this time of day, right? And Johnny's in it. Says he got it 38.02 by 38.15. Okay, so all right, so he's got his entry 38.02 and his stop just above the high here, right? And could totally work, right? Here's the what I'm looking at here is like really strong move, all this sideways action here, right? Where it's building up pressure. And then we got this move right here, and it was on some decent volume, right? We just now need this to fail in order for this trade to work, right? And that's doable. What I was saying to Johnny, and it's happening, it's happening now, where here's the 10-minute I'm sorry, the 15-minute 10 EMA right here, right? It's got to interact with that. I mean, we have yet to get a close below it today. If you look over here on the 5-minute chart, this jagged line here is the 15-minute 10 EMA, just overlaid on the 5-minute chart. And you can see we did interact with it a couple times, but we've not gotten a close below it. So it's been holding it, right? So it's just kind of like riding that wave. For a while it was riding this 5-minute 10 EMA, broke through it, but then the 15-minute became the support. So that's just the going to be the challenge, is getting that close below that level. So you have a couple of things just to consider. Like what I was looking at was, and I mentioned this with Johnny, is like, here's the VWAP down here, this kind of goldish yellow line. And when price gets away from VWAP, it has a tendency to want to get back to it, right? It almost acts as a magnet to pull it back. So that is one thing going for the trade, right? That you do have the VWAP way down here, and it's a Friday. We've got 51 minutes left in the market, and price could easily get back to that VWAP in this time. But again, you do have a couple other things here. The volume profile here, point of control, this red area here, which you can also see over here on the 15-minute. Just another area of potential support right now, because that is the volume profile. The point of control is the area where the buyers and sellers have shaken hands and agreed on price, that level most today, meaning that right here, right around that $37.90, $38 area, that are $37.95, that is the area that today the buyers and sellers have said, okay, I think that's probably a good price. So the fact that price is above that right now, that will also be a level of support that price will have to break through. So just again, doesn't mean the trade can't work. It very well can. It's made a nice move today. As Johnny pointed out, it's beyond its daily range. So, that's another thing, right? It could easily want to come back into that daily range. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. I'm curious, just give me a shout out in the chat right now. Did anybody else take this trade with Johnny? Just so I know if there's anybody else in the trade. All right, I'm not seeing any responses in the chat, so I'm going to assume that nobody else is in this with Johnny. That Johnny just went this just on his own, which is fine. That's okay. If there are people in the room right now who did take this trade, I would obviously want to follow this in the next 50 minutes for you. So okay, but we will come back to it just to see, because I'll be curious to see what happens with the Johnny's trade here. Let me just put this on a different screen here. I have several charts down below. I just want to keep an eye on it. Okay. All right. What did JP say at 2 p.m.? I'm not sure. I've been on calls all day long. So was there was Powell speaking at that time, Natasha? Did some news come out at 2 p.m.? Like I said, okay. I'm not sure. Sorry. I've have been on back-to-back calls pretty much all day. And I just got off. So okay. All right, let's take a look at, so today we were going to be looking at doing another session on analyzing price action and volume. So I've got a couple good examples for you. Two different trades. One I actually did get into and I took, one I wanted to get into and I didn't get triggered. So let's start with the one I did not get into, which was yesterday. Let's take a look. Yeah, let me zoom in here. Okay, PayPal. So let's just real quick recap on when it comes to price action and volumes, the things I look for, right? So if I'm looking to go bullish, I want to see a double bottom with a hammer candle at the bottom with a volume spike. Okay, if I'm looking to go bearish, I want a shooting star at the top of a move with a volume spike. And there's a couple of good examples here. So PayPal yesterday, and again, it's very important that you understand that I'm looking for those components in conjunction with each other. So shooting star at the top of the move with a volume spike. The volume spike is the key thing for me. And then again, a hammer candle at the bottom of the move with a volume spike, right? So double top, double bottom. This wasn't necessarily a double top here, right? So right here, if you look here, this is actually and this is not the trade I took or tried to take. This was, but if I zoom in here a little bit more, I'm going to be able to give you two good examples here from yesterday with PayPal. So if you look at PayPal, and again, we're on a 5-minute chart here, and then we can also analyze this on a 15-minute chart as well, right? Because I do like to utilize the multi-time frame analysis, use more than one chart, 5-minute, 15-minute, even going up to the 30-minute and the 1 hour. So on the 5-minute chart, price opened, we got some sell-off, came down here, right? Here was this was not one that I was looking at, right? So yes, it's you've got, candle down here making a new low, but A, it's not a hammer, and B, there's no like volume spike, right? So the volume spike is the key thing, because what I'm looking for at the bottom of the move, what I'm looking for is potential exhaustion selling, right? So where the sellers are just running out of steam. And there was no volume on this. So, this just came down here, it made a new low, and then it made a move up. Okay. And what's interesting about this is that here it was making, you can see this, it was making lower lows and lower highs, right? So here's a low, and then you got a lower high, comes down here. Actually, it didn't make a new lower low here. It did here, but here's another lower high. So price is actively moving down here, but then you get this bounce and it comes up. And it comes right back up into this level here where it had previously gotten rejected. And then you throw in, look at this shooting star. Now, the key thing, again, is look at the volume. Hopefully you can see that okay, right? So when you look at the volume and you look for the volume spike, you're looking left to see if the previous volume bars were lower than the one that's occurring, right? So looking immediately to the left, you can see that this volume bar here is greater than the preceding volume bars up until like maybe back to this candle here, right? So, but the last off of this move here, right? 5, 10, 15 minutes, the last 15 minutes, volume had dropped off, right? You can see this, that when this candle came in, big bearish candle, you can see that the volume on these 3 candles here were about the same, and then it dropped off. Then it picked up a little bit here on this one, and then it dropped off again, right? And then it started to slowly increase, but then you did get this volume spike right here at 11 o'clock. And what did you get? You got a shooting star. So granted, it's not a double top, right? Because here was the previous high. Pull this back. Previous high is way up here, right? So that's not even double top-ish. It's just a lower high. But it is a shooting star, right? So you get this nice upper wick here. So at one point, this would have been a nice bullish candle all the way up here. And then the sellers stepped in and they said, nope, we're not going to let the price go any higher. We're going to force price back down. So how do you play it? Well, 2 different ways, right? You can either just bracket that candle, meaning you can set up an entry just below the low of it. And again, I don't like to go a penny below. I like to go at least 3 cents below. And then depending on the price of the stock, I might even go more, right? 5 cents, 10 cents, depending, like if it's Tesla or if it's Nvidia, I'm gonna give it a wider gap in terms of my entry, because I don't want to just get triggered in. Like if you go 1 penny above or below whatever you're trying to get in, whether you're trying to get in long or short, a penny's easily triggered into. So I like to give it 3 cents on a lower price stock, and then maybe like 5 cents or even 10 cents, depending on the price of the stock. So here, if the low of this candle was 57.67, right? I could have just gone 57.64. So there would be my entry here, right? Looks far away, but again, this is because of the pricing of this particular stock. That is just 3 pennies, right? So again, the low here, 57.67, 57.64 would be the entry, and then my stop would probably be, up in here. And again, with the stop, I don't like to go right above, right? Because it's just a very obvious location. So I want to give it a little bit of extra room in case price does come back. Because what everyone does is, not everyone, but what a lot of people do is they'll go a penny or 2 above here and go, okay, well, that's it. And then algorithms, the high frequency trading, traders, the computers, they all see that. They know where the orders are, and they just run those orders, and then they, bring price back down. So I always like to go above, right? Give it some room. So on this particular, this would have actually turned out to be a pretty decent trade, maybe like a 2-hour trade, right? So if I'm looking at this, and again, if I'm setting this up, the first thing I need to do is I need to just set up the trade in terms of visually, here's my entry, here's my stop. But then I also have to make sure that I have my reward to risk ratio that I have established in my trading plan. And that says that I need to have, my own trading plan says I need to have a minimum of a 1.2 to 1.4 R to my realistic target. Okay. And so you go, okay, well, what does that mean? What's my realistic target? Well, my target would have to be right here, right? So if I'm setting up this trade, right, at that time, right, none of this price action had happened. At that time, I have to be able to look at this and say, well, realistically, here's the low of the day, right? And most people would just go, okay, well, that's my target, low of the day. But again, if price is going to get down in here, if it bounces, it's not going to bounce necessarily off the low of the day, especially if it comes down here. Everyone here probably is aware of what an inverted head and shoulders is, right? So if you think about what an inverted head and shoulders is, that means that here's a shoulder, right? And it has to be at the bottom of a move. So I'm already anticipating possibly what price might do if I were to get in this trade going short, which is a potential inverted head and shoulder. So here would be the shoulder, here's the head, which means that the next shoulder is going to happen somewhere in, I'm going to put it right here. I'll just highlight this area, somewhere in this area here, if you can see that square, right? So the next shoulder is going to be somewhere, above or below this one, but certainly above here. So anywhere in this range, right? So it's not like a dedicated uh, certain level. It's going to be within a zone, right? And so that rectangle I just drew would be roughly about that zone. So when I am looking at what my realistically what my target is going to be on a trade, I'm not going to use the low of day because I don't know if that's realistic. So all I'm doing is looking at the bodies of these candles and go, okay, that's probably a more realistic idea of where price could get to if this trade works. So then I just have to look at this and say, okay, well, do I have at least a 1.2 to 1.4 reward to risk? And the answer is just by the eyeball test is yes, right? Because if I can just eyeball this and that if this is about 1R somewhere here, then yeah, there definitely is. So check off all the boxes. And yes, that's a decent trade it's a good setup. I could take that trade. So in this case, if I'm looking at this and if I took, and this is again, not a trade that I took, I'm just giving you an example. I'll walk you through the trade I tried to take and did not get triggered into. So as I've talked about also is I'm not a fan of taking breakouts and breakdowns, although I am trying to experiment with that a little bit more when it comes to these shooting stars and the hammer candles, right? Because I have done some back trading and I've realized that the breakouts and the breakdowns actually do work based a lot of the times based on the setups that I'm looking at. So on this particular one, that would have triggered, right? So you would have gotten triggered in here, right? So price moves down, price moves down. Now, I have talked about several times about this, the 5-minute 2-bar trailing stop that I personally love to implement when I'm in a trade because it's just a simple, very clear, easy way of moving a stop and trailing price as it moves lower. So the only thing is on this, typically what I have to wait for is it to break a pivot before I can implement that. So if I took this trade here, well, that first pivot it's got to break is down here, right? So I really wouldn't have even had a good opportunity to really use that 5-minute 2-bar trailing stop based on waiting for it to break a pivot. But let's just walk through it anyway, just to see, there's another way that I approach it, which is I say, okay, well, let's say if I get triggered into the trade on this candle here, if I get a strong move in my direction, then I could start using this 5-minute 2-bar trailing stop. And that actually would have happened here, right? So you can clearly see that this was just another really good bearish momentum candle to the downside. So once this candle came in, technically I could implement this 2-bar trailing stop, in which case here, after this candle, if I counted back 2 candles, 1, 2, now I could take my stop from here and I could move it down above this candle. So what did I just do? Well, I basically just cut my risk in half, right? So even if price turns around and goes against me, I'm going to lose a half an R versus losing an entire R on this trade. So I've already mitigated my risk, which is the key to trading. Mitigate your risk as quickly as possible without risking getting taken out of the trade, right? You always want to give the trade room to run, but you also want to be able to move your stop as quickly as possible without risking getting taken out of the trade. So after this candle, yeah, I certainly could have moved my stop to here, right? Next candle comes in, does it make a lower low and a lower high compared to this candle? And the answer is yes. If I count back 2, 1, 2, well, technically that's the candle where I would put my stop above, but I'm not going to put my stop below the high of this candle. So at that point, I could take my stop and I could move it down even more, right? So now I move it down to like here. All right. Now, if I lose on this trade, it is going to be like what? Maybe a 1.2R loss. I can live with that. That's okay. Next candle comes in here. Lower low, lower high, count back 2, 1, 2, right? Now I'm here. So already now, immediately, not immediately, but very quickly, soon after getting to the trade, my stop is now in my profit zone, right? So even if price turns around right now after this candle, here's my entry, right? Wait a minute. I wanted my stop down here. My stop would now be like here. So it's just below my entry. Nope, I did that wrong. I had that correct. That was my entry line. I should have coded that green just for clarity. But anyway, this would be where my stop is. So now I'm already in profit, right? Very nicely in profit. And there's not a better feeling than being in a free trade, knowing that no matter what, you cannot lose on the trade, right? Great feeling. And it takes the pressure off, just mentally gets you in the right mindset. And you know that no matter what, you're going to make money on this trade. Next candle comes in. I can't move my stop because it doesn't make a lower low, all right? It has to make a lower low and a lower high compared to this candle. Well, the next candle that does is this one right here. So technically count back 2, 1, 2, and my stop can be right up in here. Bring it down, right? And again, this could be my, before we get to that level, let's talk about this. So I've already identified this as being my target, right? So what does that mean? Well, if that's my target, and I know that that is a realistic place where price could bounce, right? If this trade is going to start moving bullish on me, that's likely the place where it's going to happen. So what do I do? Do I take everything off here? Well, I don't like to do that. You can. I personally don't like to do that. What I like to do is when I identify a realistic target level, and this was the level I identified, I like to take off 90% of my trade. You could do 80, you could do 70. It's whatever you prefer. But me, I like to take off 90% of my trade. And then I like to keep trailing the remaining 10% of the trade. So let's just pretend for a moment, because again, this was not a trade that I took. So let's just say for a moment that that was the plan, right? So after this candle here, we counted back 2, 1, 2, our stop is here. Next candle, right? It does not make a lower low and a lower high. So at this point, we still need to leave our stop right where it is. So we are working, we're using this candle now, right? As our working candle. This was the last one that made the lower low and lower high. Oh, cool. All right. Thanks for joining us, Win. So here on this candle here, right? Two things. A, it makes a lower low and a lower high, so we could move our stop back. So count back 2 candles, 1, 2. Well, I'm not going to put my stop right above this candle because this has a higher high here. So my stop can go down here, right? And with this candle there, I would have then, based on my trading plan, I would have taken 90% of my position off, right? So now so it hits my target. I move my stop. I'm still holding on to 10% of my original position. So I now need to make a lower low and a lower high compared to this candle in order to move my stop one more time. So that doesn't happen until this candle here, right? So we get a little bit of a retracement and then it rolls over. And then on this candle, we get the lower low, lower high, count back 2, 1, 2. Well, now my stop can go above these candles. So I'm just going to inch it down a little bit. Down here. Then this candle is the next candle that makes the lower low, lower high. Count back 2, 1, 2. Well, these are all pretty similar, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit more. Right here. And then it bounces, right? So it did make it down. It did create a new low in the day. It bounced. And then I would have been trailed out with this candle here, right? And that trail out, that last 10%, okay, fine. It didn't keep running in my direction, but that's okay. I'm okay if it does not continue running in my direction, because more often than not, it does, and I can keep trailing that final 10%. In this case, it just bounced. And then, but what would I have given up if 10% of the original trade, from here up to here, right? That's what I'm giving back. It's nominal. It's not a lot of money, right? So I'm okay with that. So to me, that's just how I like to follow the trade, setting my targets and then following the trade down. So let's go now real quick, because I want to make sure that I have time to get through these couple of other examples. But before I do, real quick, any questions on what I just covered? Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. All right. So now let me show you the trade that I did try to take and did not, unfortunately, I did not get triggered into. Okay. So it was on this one here, right? So after it made this move here, you could have taken this bearish. And then as soon as this formed, you could have looked to flip it. I wasn't in a bearish, but I was looking to get it bullish. So back to what I'm looking for, right? So here is it's not a perfect hammer candle, but it is a hammer-ish candle, what I like to call it. It has the shape of, the body's a little bit bigger than what I would normally look for with a hammer candle, but it's still a decent looking candle in terms of the sentiment of this candle, right? Again, think about at one point, this was a big bearish candle at one point. And then the bull stepped in, and that's what all this lower wick here is all the buying pressure from the bulls stepping in and buying it up, right? But look at the volume. See, again, look how on this move down here, look how the volume dropped off, right? Really, just really low. And then it popped a little bit on this green candle, but then it dropped again. And then boom, on this candle and this candle, you get the volume spikes, right? You can clearly see, just looking left, you can see that this volume on this candle, right, was a little bit less than the volume that you could have taken this bearish trade on. So you get the hammer candle here, and that's what I saw. And so again, I kind of go back and forth with, as I had mentioned, I'm allowing myself to take breakouts and breakdowns when I see these setups. Whereas before, my trading plan was only getting in trades on a limit buy or limit sell. And I kind of go back and forth on that now. And so, and I don't really have a specific, criteria for if I say, okay, well, I'm going to take a breakout here, or I'm just going to wait for a retest and get into it. Just depends on how I'm feeling at the time. So on this particular candle, I saw this and I saw the volume spike. I thought it was looking great. So on this particular one, I took the approach where I said, okay, let me get the confirmation candle I like to see, and then I will set up a limit buy and try to get it on a pullback. So when this candle came in, I threw in my entry. So if you notice the bottom of the body here, the top of the body on this candle are almost identical, right? So let me just drop in the line here. So that was my entry right there, right? Stop down here. Okay. So there's my entry, my stop. Okay. Now, again, I need to go one step further before I can actually take the trade and say, reward to risk. Is it there? Well, we go back to my criteria for establishing this as my bearish target. My bullish target was right back to here. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go to the pivot way up here. If I'm looking here realistically, I say, okay, the high of this candle, and the close of this candle. So it's actually a little bit lower. So like right there, right? That to me is a realistic target, right? This might be asking a little bit much. Could happen. Doesn't mean that it can't. But when I am establishing my targets, I want to be very realistic about that. And if it goes beyond, great. So if I look at this, I'm like, that was a killer setup. That's like what? That's 1R there, maybe 2R. So a little over 3R if it gets to this level here, right? So because I wasn't taking a breakout. Now, if I'd taken the breakout, this would have been just a smash trade, right? If I had just bracketed this candle, I would have got triggered on this candle here, and then you can just see what would have happened. But I decided for whatever reason I was going to take take this as a limit buy, meaning I was going to wait for my confirmation candle. So when price came down here, it made the new low, threw in the high volume. What I needed to see was a strong close above this candle, which obviously did not happen here, but it did happen here, right? So as soon as this candle came in and it closed, my order went live. So that was my entry. My stop was down here. And what I wanted, and this happened, a little bit, took a little bit longer than I would have wanted. Ideally, what I like to see is the next candle or two is maybe price holds here, throws down a lower wick, triggers me in on some type of a long lower wick, and then it runs. Didn't happen, but that was what I was anticipating or what I was hoping to happen on this particular setup. But this was the confirmation candle. As soon as that closed, I'm like, there's my strong close right above this level, which is exactly what I was looking for. Set up the limit buy. My limit buy went live here, stop, and you can see what happened. Price came up here, pulled down, did not trigger me in, and then it just ran. So, learning lessons, right? Again, this is part of the trading process is back trading, right? So this is really what I'm doing right now is I'm back trading this, and this is just another data point for me to be able to be comfortable going, you know what, when I see the shooting star at the top or I see the hammer at the bottom, take the breakout of the breakdown. It's taken me a long time to get over because for the longest time, and again, I want to emphasize that I'm doing this at either the top of the move or the bottom of the move. If it's in the middle of a move, right, somewhere in here, if I'm taking some type of setup in the middle of the price action, I'm not taking a breakout or breakdown. I am going to set up a limit buy or limit sell depending on the direction. But more and more, I'm seeing that when I see these setups here, that the breakout or the breakdown is the way to go, right? Because yes, it did retest here, right? This pulled back and it retested, but it did not hit my entry. And if I had just taken the breakout of this candle, that would have been a 3R trade, 3R plus. So again, this would have been my initial target. I would have at that point taken off 90% of my trade at that level, and then I would have held the remaining 10% to see if it could keep going. All right, when MT5, you clueless. Yeah. Have a great weekend. Yeah, so you're using MT5 with the new funded account, right? I think you said that you were working with the new funded account. So I when may have jumped. But anyway, yeah, Think Markets. Yeah, that's the new funded account. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So anyway, again, am I heartbroken over this? No. Right? You're gonna miss trades. It happens. And so it just becomes again another data point for me to be able to reference and say, okay, I can take breakouts, breakdowns if they meet my criteria, right? If it meets my trading plan and that criteria is a hammer candle at the bottom with volume or a shooting star at the top with volume, right? Then I can take those breakouts or breakdowns depending on the direction. But this would have been a beautiful trade. 3R plus would have been killer, right? Didn't get triggered in, but that's okay. I love let me remove this drawing. Tony, has a great saying, Tony Pollock. I heard him say it the other day. He's like, if you're not earning, you're learning. And that's a great way to look at this, right? So I had the trade set up. It's a great setup. Didn't get triggered in. So I'm not earning, but I go back and I learn from it. And then I can also adjust my trading plan accordingly. All right, let's go on to, I'll show you the one trade I did take, Riot. On the 29th here. Okay. So this was the 29th here, right? You can see the date. Riot, again, perfect setup. And it's, you can actually see the volume bars here a little bit easier than you could on the last example, right? They're more pronounced. So here on Riot, right? We just have some, just regular price action here. We have, double bottom here. Price comes back up, pulls that. And again, I did not look to take this short at all. I was looking to go long. So price comes down here, okay? And let me zoom in here. I didn't touch on this in the other example. I should have. Again, using the 15-minute chart. I'll cover it here, but if you go back, if you want to go back to that last example in PayPal, you'll notice that the 15-minute chart was in alignment with the 5-minute chart. And now I'll walk you through it on this one, on this example. So here on Riot, and it is key that I do look for the 15-minute chart and even the 30-minute chart, 1 hour chart, depending on the time of day. I do look for those time frames to be in alignment with the smaller time frame, right? So if I see all those time frames in alignment, it's even better. So on this particular move, price comes down here, right? So here's my double bottom. Actually, it's a triple bottom really, because we had already made a double bottom here, but price comes back down. It flirts with this area here where it already had bounced once, right? So price came up here, came back down, and then bounced. Comes back down, interacts with this level again, okay? Now, look at the time at 11:30. So we get it, again, it's not a perfect hammer candle. It's hammer-ish, right? So has a bigger body than what I would normally look for, but here's that lower wick. But most importantly, note the volume spike right here, right? And look left, compare that volume spike to the volume immediately preceding it. And you can see how volume was kind of about the same here, dropped off a little bit, and suddenly boom. And then on this candle here, right at the low, and looks like did it make a new low? Let me just double check. 1265 and the low on this candle. So same low, okay? So clearly a strong level of support. But, and it actually did get a nice, really nice volume spike here, right? So you can see, if you notice that, right? So here wasn't a hammer candle, and I don't really look for this as being that kind of a setup for me, but this is, right? So this one more of kind of a neutral. This to me has more buying pressure, right? This, even though it's a bearish candle, right? Technically it's a bearish candle, but to me that's more bullish because of the buying pressure that's represented by this lower wick. But if you look at the volume here and here, it's about the same, right? But that is definitely has more bullish sentiment to it than this one to me. So came down here, and also time frame, right? Again, if I look at the time frame, this candle came in here at 10:10. Well, what did price look like at 10:10? Right? It was somewhere in between these candles. It wasn't looking that bullish, right? I mean, eventually this one here at the 10:15 candle, which went from 10:15 to 10:30, but at 10:10, this is what we were looking at, right? 10 to 10:15 was looking pretty bearish here, right? So again, this here was not meeting my trading plan because A, it's not a hammer candle, and B, I'm not seeing any type of bullish sentiment over here on the 15-minute chart. I'm just seeing one big bearish candle. So I wasn't ready to go long yet at that point. So when price comes down here and then it makes this double bottom here, and again, it's a hammer's candle, but look at this, 11:30. And what are we looking at here at 11:30 on the 15-minute chart? That is a beautiful bullish hammer candle, right? So there is a great example of the lower time frame and the higher time frame being in alignment. So I get the hammer candle here on the 15-minute that I'm looking for. I've got this setup here. So what am I looking to do? Okay. Well, my setup, on this one here, this was one where it actually did work out for me. I did not take the breakout. Again, I played this my usual conservative way where I waited for the confirmation candle, which was this one. Okay. My entry, what I did was I looked left and I was like, okay, between these two candles and these candles here, what's the level? And that was it right there. Okay. So my entry wasn't quite, it was, and again, this is just me and wanting to get a better price thing. Like, because if I bracketed this, right, it's maybe we're talking pennies, but still, like, I don't know why in my trading mind, I just think, okay, even a couple pennies is a better entry. So I could have bracketed this and it would have been perfectly fine. But I played it the way I usually do, which is I waited for the confirmation candle, which was this one. So here was the candle that caught my eye, right? Stop down here. And by the way, again, what's my target? My target is right here, right? So there's my target. And I can easily look at that and say, yes, it meets my reward to risk requirements, right? So at least a 1.2 to 1.4 reward to the risk. Great. Boom. This was the confirmation candle, right? Clearly came in strong. Let me zoom in a little bit here on this for you. Confirmation candle. Then I set up my limit buy. Boom. Triggered in right here. So in the last example with PayPal, it didn't happen, right? But this is what I was talking about. So within one or two candles, after I get the confirmation candle, I set up my limit buy here. What I'm looking for is some type of a long lower wick. Ideally, doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but ideally, that's what I want to see is if I can get triggered in on a candle that looks like that, I know that I nailed that entry. And so those of you who have listened to me explain this multiple times now, as soon as I get triggered in on that candle, right? And if I get a close above here, right, above this candle, where do you think I'm moving my stop? Let me see if anybody has the answer as to where I am immediately going to move my stop as soon as I get a close above this candle. So the answer is right here. If I get triggered in on this kind of a candle, right, where long lower wick triggers me in and I get all that represented buying pressure, I'm going to look to move my stop just below that as quickly as I can, because my trading philosophy about this type of a candle here is if I get triggered in on that, price should not get back below that, right? If the price gets back below that, it's probably going even lower. And so therefore, if I get triggered in on a candle like that, if I nail that entry, I should not risk any more than just whatever the distance is between my entry and where I can move my stop. That is where I'm going to move my stop and how I'm going to mitigate my risk as quickly as possible. So as soon as what I had to do is I had to wait, right? Triggered in here, pull back again, back down to this level. It held. That was a good sign. Then this candle. And then as soon as I got that closed, so this candle closed here and it closed above my entry. And that's a really nice looking, you can, I think you would agree in terms of the body of that candle. It's a really nice looking bullish candle, nice strong close. So as soon as this candle came in, my stop goes right here, right? So that took me, triggered in here, and 15 minutes later, okay, 5, 10, 15, get the close above. Now my stop is not quite the break even, but it's pretty close, okay? Now that I've done that, now I can implement that 5-minute 2-bar trailing stop. So as soon as I got this close, the next candle that came in, it did give me a higher high and a higher low. So if I count back 2 candles, I can't move my stop. My stop is still where it's going to be. I have to wait, right? Be a little patient. So I now need to get a higher high and a higher low compared to this candle in order to move my stop again. And so that took a little bit. I had to wait. So a little pullback, but then we got this nice bullish candle here. Of course, it was fighting with VWAP here. And then this candle finally came in here, right? And again, not a great looking candle, right? It's, you get, here's a, a shooting star type candle, right? Right here. Couldn't get that strong close below VWAP. So all the more reason why I'm going to want to move my stop, because VWAP could just be the area where price is going to get rejected and then it's just going to roll over. Okay. I have no guarantee that this trade is going to work. So when this candle came in, count back to 1, 2, technically I can go below this candle, but the more recent pivot was this one, right? So take my stop and again, I'm not going right under it, but that quickly, I'm already in profit, right? Free trade, pressure's off. I don't even have to think about it, right? If price just completely reverses on me right now, it's going to take me out of the trade for a small profit. I can live with that because I can always get back in to the trade. So after this candle formed, I now need a higher high and a higher low compared to this candle. So I have to wait. And it comes in on this candle. So technically, then I count back to 1, 2. Well, I'm not going to put my stop below this candle because I have a lower low right here. So just move my stop up. Right, again, give it a little bit of room. So there's my stop. Now I have to wait. Now I need a higher high and a higher low compared to this candle. And that doesn't happen until here, right? So this candle comes in, right? Nice looking candle. Count back to 1, 2. Well, again, I'm not going to put my stop below this candle because this is a lower low right here. So, and that actually ended up forming the next pivot. So now I can move my stop here, right? So by already just by moving my stop using this 5-minute 2-bar trailing stop, I'm not quite locking in an R, but it's close, right? I'm getting closer. So now I need a higher high and a higher low compared to this candle. And that happens here, right? And you can see these 3 candles here, right? The lows and the highs are very similar, right? Technically, this made the higher high and a higher low compared to this one, right? But because of these 3 candles, I'm not going to get too aggressive with moving my stop up, right? But I do want to move it up a little bit. So I can just inch it up there. And there, I'm pretty much locking in an R, even if price just completely reverses on me. Now, the next candle that came in here, that gave me a higher high and a higher low compared to this one, count back 2. Well, now I know that the lows of these 3 candles were all very similar. So it clearly was some support there. So I can just inch my stop up a little bit. There we go. Have to wait through this candle. I have to wait through this candle because, again, we're working off this candle now. Next candle comes in here. count back 2, 1, 2. Again, at this point, I'm just trying to just move my stop just as much as I can each time, even if it's a little bit, just to protect my profit, right? And lock in that gain if price reverses on me. Again, worst thing that, and we've all been there, right? A winning trade turning into a losing trade. It's the worst feeling in the world. Next candle, that hit my target. Okay. So my target was actually 13.15. Not 16. So I just like kind of those round numbers, right? Could have been 16, but 15 is just more of like kind of a increments of 5, I guess. So higher high and a higher low right here. Yep. Now I'm out of 90% of my position. Count back 2, 1, 2. Well, I'm going to have to work with this candle because that has a lower low than that. So again, now I'm just holding on to 10% of my position. Right. I'm already out 90%. But now I can move my stop. And at this point, I might be a little tighter with my stop now that I've hit my target, right? I can be a little tighter with the stop location. Whereas before I'm giving a little bit more room. Once I hit a target, I'm going to try to tighten up the stop as much as I can. So had to wait for this candle to come in, count back 2, 1, 2, right? Had to move my stop below. Again, just really just kind of inching it up again, right here, right? I'm not going to put below that because that has a lower low. Next candle, 1, 2, this higher high, higher low. Yep. Count back, basically leaving my stop exactly where it is. Then this candle came in, right? Now here, again, I have no idea if price is going to reverse and come back on me. It could just keep running, bullish for the rest of the day. I don't know, but still, I'm just going to keep implementing this trailing stop method for as long as it works for me, right? So after this one, count back 2, 1, 2. And again, I'm going to be tight with my stops. Once I've hit a target, I am going to be, tighter with that. So this came in, I wasn't able to move my stop again. And so, I gave back a little bit here, right? So took off 90% here. I got taken out of the trade on this candle right here, right? Because based on the trailing stop method, I wasn't able to move my stop again after this candle, right? It needed to make another high and higher low. So I got trailed out here. So I gave back a tiny bit, right? But you never know if price is just going to keep running, right? And it does sometimes. So anyway, that's the trade I took on Riot. And again, how I'm implementing this 5-minute 2-bar trailing stop. If you're not using it, if you struggle with where to put your stops, it is a great tool and a great method for doing that. Let's see. We have coming in next. I think we have Yates coming in at 4. So we got about 1 more minute. Any questions on any of this? Does anybody have any questions, comments? All right. Looks like Yates is logging in right now. Going to promote Yates to host. And just give Yates a second or two.
What's up, man?
There you are.
How you doing?
Let's see. Doug is asked, do you have a recording of the 5-minute trailing stop? So Doug, so you mean like the information I just covered? Yeah. So this actually was recorded. I'll post it in Slack. If I don't get to today, certainly tomorrow. So just check Slack between. So if you want to go back and rewatch this, yeah, no worries. It's fine. So this is all recorded. And so I gave a couple examples of this today. I'm going to post it in Slack. So feel free to check it out there. And like I said, if I don't get it in this evening, it'll be in tomorrow. Okay. My pleasure. All right, Yates. So I've promoted you to host. I will stop my share
We
and I will stop the recording.